Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked, blissed? Dr. Shealy, are you blissed?
Yes.
So great to hear your voice, Dr. Shealy. I was thinking about you over the weekend. It's wonderful spending time with you 2 hours a week right here on USA Prepares. And I just want to tell you that I got a number of phone calls over the weekend from all parts of the country, from the West Coast, from the South, from the East Coast, even from the northern parts of the country. And the calls thanked me for what we do to pass on to our instructors, such as Dr. Norman Shealy. And the common thread that went through most of these calls, if not all of them, was that, we think about these things, but it really is nice to know that we are not alone, meaning our class. Our class thinks these things, and we say them, and it's a reinforcement that they haven't lost their minds, that there are those of us who think the same way. And so I wanted to thank all of you who called to express that, over the last few days. I really appreciate it. Dr. Shealy, so the question is, who killed Jeffrey Epstein?
I was hoping you'd bring that one up.
Yeah.
It is one of the most fascinating questions of the decade, isn't it? And I have to say, the circumstances are just too unbelievably suspicious that he's abandoned. He's supposed to be watched every 30 minutes. They take his cellmate out, and nobody's there watching him every 30 minutes. I mean, this is murder, in my opinion. Until proven otherwise, it's a plain, undoubtable murder. Now, who did it? I don't know.
Well, there's a number of theories, and one of them is, were the Clintonistas involved?
Of course.
Because it looks like Jeffrey's diary, his black book, names and names. Of course, Prince Andrew's in there, so we've got the royalty, we've got the captains of finance, we've got businessmen, we've got Ellen Dershowitz, we've got a number of people whose names are recognizable, and it looks like they like little children. They like young, fresh meat, if you want to call it. I mean, they even had a person in charge of the fresh meat department at Jeffrey Epstein and Company. And this is really, really sick. And this is such a high-profile situation, a high-profile case. And then we can't believe that he was left alone and that no one knows anything. I mean, really, it's impossible, absolutely impossible. And the interesting thing is, I liken this to Timothy McVeigh. So Timothy McVeigh was the guy who was focused on for the Oklahoma City bombing.
Right.
And it was like he did it. He was the guy with the truck. He was the guy with the ANFO, the ammonium nitrate fuel oil bomb, and it blew off just one side of the building on one side of the street, and everything around it was okay except this one building was blown up. And that happened to have some records of the Agent Orange victims of the Vietnam conflict. So that's what was held in this building. And I remember watching that. And watching the live coverage, and there was a reporter talking to someone else on camera, and the reporter said, I just got a message. They are going to remove the unexploded ordnance from the basement of the building. They're going to stop the rescue efforts to remove unexploded ordnance. So what does that mean? well, maybe that's the bombs that didn't go off to peel off the face of the building. But anyway, so Timothy McVeigh was the guy that was focused on. I thought, you know what? I wonder if they're going to say, look, Tim, we're going to get you out of this. But what we're going to have to do is, well, we're going to have the trial. So we're going to have the trial. We got to blame it on somebody. So you get to be the guy. And when we have this trial, we're going to see if we can get you off. Oh, we couldn't get you off. So that's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to have you in prison. And even though you've been sentenced to death, what we're going to do is we're going to fake your death. We're going to give you an injection. But it's kind of just like an anesthetic. Like if you're going to be operated on with, major surgery, it'll slow your heart rate down. And what we'll do is we'll have our coroner pronounce you dead. We'll take you out the back door, and you'll have a new identity. We'll give you some surgery, plastic surgery, and you'll be a new guy, good as new. And I think they told him that, except they gave him the lethal injection because they didn't want any loose ends. And I'm wondering.
I thought you were going to go ahead with the whole facade.
Yeah, no. I think they said no. We got to, we got to give him a full dose.
They promised him one thing and gave him the other. Got it.
Right.
Well,
right.
that fits in with their nefarious behavior anyway.
Yeah, and I was thinking, okay, how about Jeffrey Epstein? Now, I wonder if they said to him, look, everything's going to be okay. And now either he was a CIA or NSA operative and he was collecting data on all of these other people so that they could be blackmailed. And I'm talking about, William Jefferson Blythe Clinton, with his interest in little girls. So maybe they could get him on the hook and blackmail him, and along with other powerful people who had, questionable, loose morals or the lack of morals. So I guess what I'm saying is I believe that I don't believe Jeffrey Epstein was this guy that was so bright. He left the financial corporate world to form his own corporation, Jeffrey Epstein Company, and he was this brilliant financier who made lots of money for people. I think he got infusions from the spy agencies to set him up so that he could buy all these mansions and these islands and these jets, and he could ferry around the rich and famous so he could blackmail important people so that the ruling elite, if you will, the deep state, could have their way by forcing their will on these weak charactered people like William Jefferson Blythe Clinton et al. That's my thoughts. What do you think about that?
Well, I think anything is possible, but it's all crooked. Mm-hmm. It's all evil. It is all part of the whole Committee of 300 and all their subterranean activities. And all of these people are beyond belief. I only hope that somehow, in some decade, karma catches up with the bastards.
I was chatting with a man recently, and he is a peace officer, and he will remain nameless. But every once in a while, I get a chance to talk with him, and I was talking with him, and I won't say whether it's on the phone or in person or whether it's from Missouri or someplace else. But he is in our class, meaning USA Prepares. He pays attention to what we say. And recently, within the last couple of months, I asked him, do you know of a single politician who is not crooked? Do you know one? Do you know one? And I'm paraphrasing. And he said, no. I said, not one. Not one. Not one honest politician. He's never met one. And this particular person has been in uniform for years. And he's met lots of them. Lots of them. Local, county, and higher than that. Doesn't know a single politician who is honest. And of course, the rest of us feel the same way. So there you have it. Somebody who is in a position to know, to literally know. And of course, class, if you think about it, the Capitol Police in Washington, D.C., their role is to keep from the public the crimes that the elected, alleged representatives commit. Their job is to keep them out of the newspaper so we don't know the crimes that they commit, like when they run people over, drive drunk, under the influence of drugs, those kinds of things. Pedophilia. I mean, heck, what's his name? From Massachusetts, Congressman Barney Frank is running a house of prostitution with homos. And you don't hear about that, right? Private parties, I guess they are. So Jeffrey Epstein, I think he was just the one epicenter of pedophilia, perversion, and he was able to rub elbows with, the Clintons and so forth. And class, if you think we're kidding, just type in the word Clinton, Clinton, comma, Arkansas, the contraction of Arkansas and suicide. Look it up. And you'll get a chance to see, about, the body count. This guy was president of the United States, corporate CEO of USA, William Jefferson Blythe Clinton. So, dead men don't talk. Dead men don't talk. And I read an article, Dr. Shealy, and you probably read it as well, that Bill and Hillary were yucking it up, and they were all excited, just after the news broke that Jeffrey Epstein was dead. Now, I don't know if he's dead or not. Maybe they ushered him out the back room. Maybe, I don't believe he committed suicide. I don't believe that for a second. I believe he either was murdered or they escorted him out, which is kind of remote. I think they would just kill him because there's too many people that when the information comes out as to who was involved in his circle, I think it's going to be unbelievable. I think we're going to find the media is involved.
The information ever comes out. If the information ever comes out.
I hope it does.
Well, I hope it does too. But, it is so ingrained in Congress and the national politics that I don't trust them to ever let it out.
Mm-hmm. And here's my biggest concern, my greatest concern about this whole thing, that the victims, they're next on to be placed on suicide watch. Not that they would kill themselves, but I have a feeling that they are next, because if they didn't get the message that dead men don't talk, then these women who have been abused by the Epsteins et al., they are at risk of being murdered as well. What are your thoughts about that, Dr. Shealy?
Oh, these people, basically, you ever brought up the murder of babies and children by this group. So they're the most evil group of people any human being can imagine.
Right. We're going to a break very soon, and I don't see, or I don't hear the music. Maybe I'm missing it. Yeah. Well, Dr. Shealy, if we want to get in touch with you, what do we do to get in touch with Dr. Norman Shealy at your clinic in Springfield, Missouri?
417-351-5221.
417-351-5221. That's Central Time Zone, right here in Missouri. And Dr. Shealy's clinic is in Springfield, Missouri. And if you'd like to go to his website, normshealy.com, NORMSHEALY.com. We'll be right back. So you sent me information about your studies, the efficacy, how well it worked, and so forth. Would you care to go over that so our class can understand about the mattress that you've invented, the pyramid, the Lavoisky type information, the Tesla information, and your results?
Well, basically, I learned about this in 1995 when I was invited to the Ukraine to study what they call microwave resonance therapy. And they had discovered in the early 1980s that human DNA resonates or vibrates at 52 to 78 billion cycles a second. And that this frequency is absorbed through the skin and applying just a billionth of a watt a billionth of a watt of those frequencies, 2 acupuncture points, could activate the acupuncture points themselves. Well, that reminded me of Lukoski, who in 1925 published his first work on the Lukoski multi-wave generator. He actually also exposed people to these frequencies. I don't think he understood exactly what or how he was doing it, but he used a Tesla coil hooked up to 2 copper coils, and I reproduced his effort and found that when you put a Tesla coil and hook it to anything metal, but especially copper, of course, it radiates these frequencies at a billionth of a watt. And so my first discovery then was to create a copper pyramid so we could sit in it. And we found that people who would sit in it for just a half hour a day regrew their telomeres. Well, that's kind of crazy. A lot of people don't want a pyramid, don't have room for a pyramid in their house. So I then created a mattress. The mattress has just plain old copper screening, similar to what you put in your, if you want to use copper in your window screens. And then a pound of crushed sapphire crystal on that, because sapphire enhances the electromagnetic potential. And we tested that with 34 people, and just hooking that up and having it go off 1 hour every night while sleeping, it actually regenerates your telomeres 3.5% in 1 year instead of shrinking 1%. Now, we also have found that you can stimulate specific acupuncture points with these frequencies, and those acupuncture points happen to be the rings of fire, earth, and crystal, but that takes a lot of time. So then I came up with also bliss oils that would stimulate these same acupuncture points, but they're very specific for these particular points. And they only take, 30 seconds per circuit, so a minute and a half a day. So you have 2 choices. Either apply the bliss oils to fire, earth, and crystal every day, and it'll regrow your telomeres or regenerate them 3.5% a year, or sleep on the Rejuvenatrix mattress turned on for 1 hour while you're sleeping every night. Both do exactly the same thing. That's a brief overview.
And so when you talk about regrowing your telomeres, you're talking about extending life, period.
Exactly.
And so, Dr. Shealy, is there additional research? Do you have to worry about politicians and the Committee of 300 demanding that you extend their lives? I'm being serious.
Well, I would like to somehow refuse to allow them to get a hold of it, but I don't think I can.
Yeah. No, that's what I was.
In fact, I'd like to electrocute them instead of rejuvenate them, but oh well.
So we're looking at growing telomeres, living longer. And, let me ask you this, Dr. Shealy. What about the PEMF device? Does that have similar benefits with relation to regrowing telomeres?
Unfortunately, no. It does not regrow telomeres.
But the scalar energy device, what about that?
That does not regrow. Each of these has different effects and wonderful effects, but neither one of them will regrow the telomeres.
All right, we'll be right back with Dr. Shealy. Dr. Shealy, I was in Menards a few days ago, and it's out in Springfield. It's one of those big box stores, and I decided that I would let them know that I'm entitled to being tax exempt on certain purchases for the farm. So when I buy things for the farm that relate directly to the farm, they're sales tax exempt. But I had to fill out this form. So I filled out the state form, and I brought it over to customer service. I talked to them over the phone of what they wanted me to do, and they said, just come over to customer service. So I did. And I was waiting in line for a customer service guy, and it was about 10 minutes, and it's right near the registers. And there were these 2 10-year-old sweethearts, and they were, I guess their parents might have been shopping, but they were using the bags that were stacked up of birdseed, 25-pound bags as punching bags, and punching and punching and punching and punching them. And the guy behind the counter, customer service, he's like some kind of management. He was a little bit above the cashiers, but he probably wasn't a store manager because he was kind of young. And he's kind of noticing this, but he's ignoring these out-of-control children, like punching these bags nonstop. And they're having a great time. And I'm thinking, boy, when I was that age, my mother would have a fit if I even thought about doing something like that. damaging property of others, beating up merchandise on the shelves. And, I wasn't allowed to touch things. I could look, but I couldn't touch. And, as being part of the Boy Scouts, I learned that you would, if you did something, you put it back in better condition than you found it. At least as good, hopefully better. And so I was watching this, and finally the person behind the counter had time for me, and he said, okay, follow me. And we had to walk past these two little young sweethearts and to the kiosk where I had to enter in all this information about, the farm and the status and so forth, and why I was tax exempt. And so as we were walking past, I said to him, boy, if I ever have children, I hope they're just like these little darlings. And he said to me, well, at least they're not throwing things. So what he indicated to me was that this is common. This is the way it is, and it gets way worse than this when, children start throwing things and breaking things in the store. Now, Menards, even though I don't totally enjoy going to Menards, the store is clean. There is no question about it. It's as clean as any store, period. It is very, very clean and organized. And I don't think they appreciate these little young thugs doing that kind of thing. Now, the point I'm getting to is I don't think that these two children are alone. When I got a haircut recently, I was there's a whole bunch of seats, and it was one of those body shops where one of those assembly line body shops, a chain, and you just take a seat and you get whoever cuts the hair next cuts your hair. So you don't have like a stylist that is the one who cuts your hair over and over. So you get anybody, and they get anybody. So I was waiting, and there was only one other person ahead of me. And so it was a young person. I'm thinking 12, 13, 14 years old. And I turned to him and I said, so are you getting your hair cut? And he looked at me and he turned away from me. And it was right next to me. And so I waited a couple minutes and I said, so are you in school? And he goes, no. And he turns his back to me. And I'm thinking, boy, there's a common thread here with those two little thugs at Menards and this young person. And there's like 60, 70 miles apart in distance from where I saw them. And I'm thinking, this is kind of typical. Young people don't know how to behave today. And so now I'm thinking that we're doomed, because I think there are a whole bunch of young people like this who don't know how to behave, don't know how to act, don't know how to communicate, don't know how to interact with other people. And this is our future. Dr. Shealy, are you seeing similar things?
Oh, yes.
Man. Okay, so then the next question is, how did this happen? Is it the cell phones? Is it that they don't know how to communicate because of cell phones? Are they not learning how to behave in school? Are the parents just forgetting to raise them? Or what do you think it is?
Well, I think it's a degeneration of conscientiousness. I'm well into writing my new book called Who Killed Common Sense, the failure of conscientiousness, because as a nation, 97.3% of Americans are not conscientious. And that is the problem. In other words, they're not organized, not responsible. They are ignoring common sense.
And what was that percentage?
97.3. Only 3.
90.
Yeah.
Wow.
Only 2.7% of Americans even have the basic health habits.
Wow. I don't think that 2.7% of us can carry the other 97.3%. I don't think it can happen.
I'm with you. That's why I'm writing this new book. But whether we can change any of that 97.3% remains to be seen.
And Dr. Shealy, you are pursuing learning more and more and more about conscientiousness, and as far as I know, you even have an area of Missouri State University working on that under your direction. Is that correct?
Well, I endowed the professorship, the chair, and so fortunately, we are good friends, and so we talk frequently. But she's responsible for her own stuff, but we agree. She's a great researcher.
Has she found anything that you can share with us so far about conscientiousness?
Well, the most interesting thing she's found to me is that the test that's been used for the last 100 years is not a very good test. So if people grade themselves differently from how their parents or a friend will grade them. And so this is one of those odd tests where people grade themselves on how conscientious they are. But if someone who knows them well, a friend or the parent grades them, it'll be totally different.
And how will it be different? Do they grade themselves harsher, more strictly, more stringently, or
interestingly, the parents grade them more strictly, and the friends grade them less strictly.
Isn't that interesting? I had a boss when I was in banking. He came from General Electric, and he used the General Electric methodology for the annual performance reviews, the annual appraisal, the annual, let's see how the employee is doing. And what he did was a little different from the typical approach. Typically, the boss would call you in and he'd say, okay, this is your performance review, sit down. And you sit down and your boss would say, okay, here are these 47 things, and here's what you do well, here's what you don't do well, here's what you need improvement on, and here is, based on this, here is the percentage that your salary will change. Hopefully it will go up if you do a good job. And, that was back in the 70s. Well, what the banking boss did, and that was when I worked for a Fortune 100 company, an industrial company. When I worked for banking, I had a boss who came from General Electric. And what he did was he said, here's the performance review. It's blank. Mine's blank. Yours is blank. You take yours, fill it out tomorrow. We'll talk about, what you think. So you tell me what you think this should look like, fill it out, and I'll fill out mine, and we'll compare notes. So it was a self-evaluation. And the logic behind that was that if you evaluated yourself and if you were honest, you would know more about your failures and your shortcomings than the boss did, because the boss didn't know everything. The boss knew some of it, but not all of it. And what typically happened if a person was honest is they would grade themselves much harsher than the boss would. So let's say the boss might say, well, you get a 90 out of 100, and the employee might say, well, I get a 75. Well, that doesn't jive with what you're saying now. So it looks like things have changed now because the individual would think he's doing better than the boss would think. Is that right?
Yeah.
So that means we're lying. Not you and me, but I mean the employee or the person is lying, thinking that they're doing way better than they are. And so that explains a lot, Dr. Shealy, because that explains why, to me, it's coming to light. So people are thinking, it's okay, I'm eating healthy. I do a good job. I only eat at McDonald's like 3 times a week. Right? And I only have those big gulp, 44-ounce sodas like, 5 days a week. And, I only have alcoholic beverages, 2 shots of gin a night. I mean, I can just see them filling out mentally how well they're behaving, and they think that they're doing a great job because they could have 5 shots of gin a night, but no, they're really good, and they only smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day instead of 7. I got it. I think that's how we got here. I think we're rationalizing our behavior as well. It's that old story about, the corporate motto is this company's doing really lousy, and their corporate motto is, we're no worse than anybody else. I think that's it. I think you hit the nail right on the head. Man. And I don't think there's any pulling out of this anytime soon. Do you?
No.
Well, there's a really disturbing story that I read. I sent you a link to this. Normally we don't share this, links and what we might talk about, but this weekend we did. Dr. Shealy, there's an article in the New York Post, and headline, and this really bothers me because this shows what's happening in society. Quote, EPA, that's Environmental Protection, reauthorizes the use of cyanide bombs, BOMBS, to kill wild animals, end quote. Goes on to say, quote, the Trump administration has reauthorized the use of controversial traps dubbed cyanide bombs to kill coyotes, foxes, and other animals across the U.S. The Environmental Protection Agency announced this week that it would allow, on an interim basis, the use of M44 devices, which trap wildlife with bait before spraying them with sodium cyanide in their mouths, according to CBS, that's Columbia Broadcasting System News. That's mainstream news. The spring-loaded devices, which have killed more wild animals since they were first. The spring-loaded devices, which have killed more than wild animals since they were first introduced in the 1960s, have been blasted as inhumane. Cyanide traps can't be used safely by anyone, anywhere. A carnivore conservation director at the Center for Biological Diversity said. So here we have cyanide bombs being approved by the Trump administration, and I got to tell you that I thought he was going to be a much better president than he has been. He's making some mistakes, and this type of device is against the Geneva Convention. It's against the Geneva Convention. We can't use it in war, but we can use it right here in the United States. Dr. Shealy, can we talk more about cyanide, what it does, and when we come back?
Of course.
Pretty dangerous stuff. The reauthorization by the Trump EPA and the use of cyanide bombs, cyanide, C-Y-A-N-I-D-E, bombs to kill wild animals. And there are a number of things that are prohibited by agreements such as the Geneva Convention of 1925, 1949, the 1979 Convention of Certain Conventional Weapons, the 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention, and the 1997 Ottawa Treaty, and the 2008 Convention on Cluster Munitions, to name a few. And poisonous gases are named in these agreements. But it seems to be okay by the United States EPA to use them on wild animals. Dr. Shealy, what does cyanide gas do?
Kills you. It's one of the quickest, fastest, easiest way to die.
Is it painful?
Well, it can be, because your breathing is torturous while you're dying.
Mm-hmm. And how long does this take?
Oh, well, we're not talking. It varies with the dose, of course, but I wouldn't want to breathe it for 1 second, let alone for a minute or two.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what the EPA is doing is allowing the use of this in the wild, and what happened was there was a young boy's dog who came upon this and was killed by it. So, it's kind of like landmines.
Oh yeah.
You don't know exactly.
It's illegal in war, but illegal in this country. I mean, that's crazy.
Absolutely crazy. And I know our president can't watch over all the insanity that's happening all around us. It's just so much of it. But this is a big deal, allowing the use of cyanide in the open, where anyone can come in contact with it, or anything. And then what happens if it sits there for years and years and years, and then someone comes in contact with it, or, I mean, really, why are we even making this stuff? Why? We should have learned from World War I and World War II how dangerous this is. We nerve agents like VX and sarin gases. I mean, during World War II, this is absolute insanity. So what is banned by these conventions? Well, let me just tell you: poisonous gases, non-detectable fragments. So that would be, if you fire a projectile and you can't find it with an X-ray. So these fragments go into a person, and the surgeon is desperately trying to save the life of someone, but they can't find what they're looking for because it doesn't show up on X-rays. So that'd be a non-detectable fragment. Landmines. We wanted to ban landmines, and some people think that's why Diana was killed, because she was an advocate for banning landmines. Well, you can't have that, right? So that's another reason, besides her marrying outside of the bloodline the family wanted to marry within. And then incendiary weapons. That would be weapons that set fire or burn things. Well, what about napalm? We used that during the Vietnam conflict. Blinding laser weapons, can't use that. However, the military now has laser weapons, but you can't use them. But I guess that's okay, even though it's not in accord with the agreements that were made. And then expanding ordnance. Okay, so that would be, you shoot a weapon and it expands, so it's more deadly than it would be if it didn't expand. Well, that's been banned. Poison bullets have been banned. Cluster bombs have been banned. And biological weapons have been banned. But we're still working on biological weapons, aren't we, in Fort Detrick, Maryland? So it seems to me that we have these agreements that don't mean much because, well, we violate them. And I don't think we're the only ones that violate them. So why have the agreements? But this thing about EPA authorizing the use of cyanide is just over the top crazy. Dr. Shealy, do you have some items that you would like to share with us today?
Well, I think we all need to take a deep breath and not get any cyanide in our minds. The idea of allowing in the wild, free, out in the wilderness, or in the woods where people go, an item that is banned in international war is insanity personified.
Well, okay, if we're going to put them in the wild, I think, just like taxes need to be applied uniformly. You can't just pick out one group and tax them without taxing, everybody that would be purchasing those kinds of things. So taxes are supposed to be applied uniformly. So if that were the case, then I think we should put them in Washington, D.C. I think if we're going to have these cyanide bombs, they need to be, wherever people go. If we're going to use them, let's just spread them around everywhere. Washington, D.C., everywhere. Now, I'm being facetious. What I am saying is this is insanity, and they should be banned, period. That's it. And we shouldn't be making them. Dr. Shealy, I was thinking about something that really was horrific. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Dr. Norman Shealy is with us, medical doctor. Dr. Shealy, I was thinking about something that man had done with the advice and counsel and support and encouragement of the federal government. During the 1920s, we disked up and we plowed up and we cut down trees in the plains areas of the United States. And I'm talking about Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico. We planted wheat, and farmers were really excited about the amount of money that they were making from these new farming methods. And then there was a drought, and it happened in like 1930, to coincide with the Depression. The next thing we knew, we had a dust bowl that lasted 10 years, and it was the greatest environmental disaster man-made that had happened since man has been around. I mean, we absolutely did as people died of dust, pneumonia. Do you have any recollection of any of that time in your life? I'm talking about the 1930s through 1940, 1941. Do you remember hearing about that, being involved with that, reading about it, how serious that was?
Actually, I don't. Now, I have to admit, I just may have been out of the mainstream during that time, because I was born in 32, but I don't remember reading about it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've talked to people here in Missouri, some of the farmers, and they said that, they say, well, we don't have any topsoil here. And I'm thinking, gosh, on some parts of our farm, we have 3 feet of topsoil. And I think that we were the beneficiaries of some of those 300 million tons of topsoil that blew away from Kansas, Colorado, New Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma. It blew toward the East Coast. There was so much dust in the air. There was a newspaper article that said that if Lady Godiva was riding a horse, even the horse wouldn't see her because because the dust was so great. The sky was black. You couldn't see the sun, literally. And there was no place to go. Literally, there was no place to go. Cars were stopped. Cattle died in horrific numbers because they inhaled the dust. They were blinded. It was like being in a sandblaster. Literally, there's no place to go. And the homes weren't that airtight, and even if they were, the dust would find their way in, and the housewives would sweep out dust, and I'm talking buckets of dust after the daily storm came by. And then they had these high winds, and it was really, really terrible. We haven't seen anything like it recently, but it could happen again with our farming techniques. So I was just wondering if you had any experience with that.
I did not. Okay. And I grew up on a farm.
Yeah. Steve Elkins, welcome. You're on with Dr. Norm Shealy.
Hey there, guys. Question. I heard you talking about the cyanide, and I guess question for you and for Dr. Shealy. There's a book I read a long time ago called Lab 257, The Disturbing Story of the Government's Secret Plum Island Germ Laboratory by Michael Christopher Carroll. Have either of you guys, both of you, ever read this book by chance?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it.
Okay, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the Plum Island Germ Laboratory. I understand it's a bioweapons laboratory, and they're really not looking for cures for diseases. It's simply how they can probably take out large quantities, mass quantities of people, I would assume.
Well, the reason I won't read that stuff is I don't trust anything the government says. Period. End report. So to me, it's all propaganda.
This isn't coming out from government. Yeah, this isn't coming out from government. Michael Christopher Carroll is a researcher.
Well, I don't need to read the book to know that I consider the government evil.
Okay.
And if the government's doing it, I don't want to know any more about it because, to me, they are the terrorists supreme.
Agreed.
Steve, what did you learn from the book? Well, for those who are wondering, Plum Island is off the coast of Long Island. It's west of New Jersey. It's west of New York City, and it's about 3 miles long. It's about a mile wide, and it's the site of the Plum Island Animal Disease Center. And it was established by the USDA, in 1954. And it's the former U.S. military installation called Fort Terry, established in 1897. So it's an island where they can conduct experiments and allegedly away from prying eyes. And my understanding is that Lyme disease was developed there, and made its way to Connecticut, across the water. Is that your understanding, Steve?
Yeah, it is. It actually is. And understanding how pharmaceuticals also hold patents on certain diseases. I mean, it's amazing. They have patents on diseases, anthrax, and there's several others. When I read the book, I got to admit, I was not quite awake until I read the book. And then later on, I started learning more and more about, FBI and CIA, their scope of practice, what they actually do. And I'm quite concerned that, it's my assumption that the FBI is beholden to the U.S. Constitution, and they are not. They are very much rogue like the CIA. They don't have to follow the rules of the CIA, the Constitution. They do whatever they want to do. They're outside the scope of the rule of law. They're outside the Constitution, Bill of Rights. And I'm not sure why this president, and I am not a fan of this guy at all. It was a lesser of two evils type situation here for Donald Trump, and I surely will not even participate in the next election because I know how fraudulent it is. That's another thing I don't quite understand. He talks about fraud in the election system, and then he doesn't want to dismantle it and make it fair and honest. It's very, very, very interesting who's controlling Donald Trump, the globalists. He's not accomplished anything. And my report card to him last night on my show was basically an F report card. I mean, it's just a total F report card. And thinking about 4 more years of this guy being in the Oval Office, another F presidency, and more terrorism, more wars, more nation building. And but off topic there. The book taught me, it actually showed me and taught me that I guess at that time before I read the book, I was maybe believing more of what I heard from government and maybe more what I heard from the mainstream media. Now I know they're both lying. I kind of think of both the government, I think of the government as a cheating ex-wife, and you can't trust her. And she's been caught lying too many times, and so everything comes out of their mouth. I don't say take it with a grain of salt. I say take it with a bucket of salt. And I just don't buy anything they're doing anymore, anything they're saying. All the numbers are fudged. Wall Street's fudged. All the numbers you can possibly think of are being fudged. I mean, the 10, 12 million illegals, they've been using the number for at least a dozen years. And we know it's at least 3 or 4 times that. So I just was curious what you might think about what's going on Plum Island. I think a lot of bad things are going on there. And I think they're looking at understanding Agenda 2030 and a depopulation program. I would not be the slightest. I think I'm pretty sure they're working on mass kills.
Have you been to a Menards? Do you have a Menards down there in Florida?
No, we don't have this over the Midwest. Nothing down here like that. I like Menards, and I agree with you. They are very clean inside. They're very, very organized.
All right, here's why I mention that. Whenever I go to Menards, I look at the parking lot, and I don't see very many cars there. Now, some of the cars are for that the employees use to get there. When I look around, and the nearest customer to me is 100 feet away, no matter where I am, the nearest one. So they have very few customers, and I'm thinking about the electric bill, the air conditioning bill, the tax bill. There is absolutely no way that the sales that I see generated whenever I'm there can pay for the electric bill at that moment, let alone the interest on the inventory and, the employees and the rest of it. There's no way it can pay just the electric bill. So when you talked about it's fake, it's all fake, the numbers are fake, Wall Street's fake, it seems to me that these stores aren't generating enough revenue to pay the bills. Now, some must be, but I think that they're lying too. So they're saying that everything's rosy, but I don't believe that, because if everything were rosy, you'd be able to find employees that knew what they were doing, but you can't. So they can't hire employees that know what they're doing. They don't have enough employees because there are lines whenever you do go to do something, whether you are at the customer service or the checkout or whatever, there are lines, and that's intentional so that you wait rather than them wait for you, because they'd be paying extra. So I don't believe the numbers. I believe that companies are in way worse financial shape than they are showing. Dr. Shealy, do you see stores that are packed with lots and lots of customers the way they used to be, let's say, 20 years ago?
Well, I don't go to stores if I can avoid it. I do more shopping online to 99%. If I can buy it online, I buy it online. I'm talking about even peanut butter and salmon and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I prefer to go through Amazon to try to make my way into Walmart or a regular grocery store most of the time.
Mm-hmm. And I do that to save taxes as well. I absolutely do. I refuse to give 1 cent that I don't have to the state for sales tax. I absolutely refuse. And that's why I went through the hassle of becoming tax exempt at Menards. And class, you can do the same thing. If you have a business and you can justify that your purchase is for your business and it's tax exempt, you should consider doing that. Steve, any other comments you'd like to share with us?
No, I agree with you. And, I'm getting a little tired, too, when I go to a hardware store and I find people that are out of place. We have a lot of bodies out there, and they're not being taught. They're not being educated in their departments. And there's nothing worse than walking in and asking somebody, and they shrug their shoulders. Well, I don't really know. What are you looking for? What's it called again? And I find lots of people that they're just bodies and positions. They're actually not educated, and it's pretty bad. Like I agree with you that you need to call out the manager and say, hey, you've got people in positions in certain areas of the store here that have no knowledge of their merchandise. They don't have any answers at all. And why do you have them? Why don't you have a program to educate these people? And it appears to be an ongoing problem. I mean, not only just in the hardware stores, but everywhere I go, I find people that just are bodies that don't have education in their areas at all. It's quite frustrating.
Steve Elkins, while you're with us, would you mind staying with us for
Sure.
another short segment? The reason I'm asking is I'd like to talk about 6 cancer patients contracting a rare blood infection because the nurse stole liquid opioids and refilled the vials with contaminated tap water. And since you are a nurse in intensive care in the emergency room, and Dr. Shealy's a medical doctor, let's talk about that. Class, Dr. Norman Shealy is with us, medical doctor, and Steve Elkins is with us. Both of these gentlemen are broadcasters. Steve Elkins is a nurse, an emergency room nurse, and a intensive care nurse. And so the question, let me just explain what happened. So there was a nurse by the name of Kelsey Mulvey, 27 years old, was charged in June with fraud and tampering and faces up to 10 years in prison and a fine of $250,000 because 6 patients at Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center in Buffalo, New York, contracted a blood infection last summer. And they were diagnosed with a disease resulting from soil contamination or dirty water. And they inspected what happened, and they concluded that the nurse had been opening vials of opioids, taking the opioids out and refilling the vials with tap water, and then the patients would be injected with the tap water as compared to the opioids. So she was stealing the opioids, and so 6 patients got a rare disease as a result of this. Dr. Shealy, have you ever heard of anything like this?
Well, no, I have not, but I would like to see her caned in public square. The appropriate punishment would not be just a little bit of jail and a fine. She ought to be beat half to death. That is absolutely beyond criminal behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Steve Elkins, as a nurse, Steve Elkins, as a nurse, have you ever heard or seen anything like this?
Actually, Vincent, it's funny that you mentioned it, but yes, I have actually experienced it. I have at least 5 cases I can tell you about where nurses I worked with did the same exact thing, except maybe they didn't use tap water. They used normal saline or distilled water. And they would actually, on a fentanyl drip that was for a patient for pain management, they would go in with a syringe and pull out 10 cc's, and they would just start, take the opioid that way and steal it that way, or take the injectiles that we had in our drawer locked up, and they would refill those up with just normal saline. And so when you grabbed one and you thought you were giving your patient some pain medicine, and the patient comes back and says, I still got tons of pain. I'm still on 8 out of 10 scale. there's something wrong here. Then we started realizing some of the tabs were broken a little bit. Something's wrong here. And it's strange, we didn't have a camera system at that time, but we did find out what was happening, and a nurse that actually had an addiction was stealing narcotic from either the patient at the bedside or actually through the drawer, medication drawer itself. So I unfortunately had to turn somebody in for that. And it was strange because the hospital caught her, gave her a second chance, which is strange. It's like putting an alcoholic behind the bar at a nightclub or something and telling them to serve drinks and never touch an alcoholic drink. They gave her a second chance, which was really strange, very lenient. No, they really did.
Call it
and
stupid.
so, and then we had to actually monitor her, and we actually had to give the narcotics for her. If her patient requested a narcotic for pain management, we actually had to take responsibility. All the nurses said, well, I'll give the medication. You just tell me, and I'll sign it out, and I will personally give it myself. And so her keys were taken away, and unfortunately she tried to pull a fast one on me because she thought we were good friends, and we were good friends, but, patient is first, and I'm certainly not going to cover for something wrong like that. So she broke the oath with me, took my key, and got the narcotic out and attempted to take it somewhere else, to take it herself, and I stopped her, took it away, and she said it was for her patient. So I walked in her patient's room, and I said, are you in pain? He goes, no, why? Oh, well, you didn't call for a narcotic? You didn't call for pain medicine? No. So I knew right away she was challenging it. She was using our friendship and other people's, so I had to turn her in. And it was a stupid thing to give her a second chance. Like I said, she needs some help, some serious treatment. And she was then taken off the unit, and her license was taken, and I think she had to go to the States and probably some rehab program. It's interesting that a nurse can actually not get caught, but actually confess, and they can't take your license if you confess before they catch you. But they made an exception for her, and unfortunately, she was an awesome nurse, an excellent nurse. She just had an addiction.
Did she do prison time?
No. The worst she got was her license was taken away, and I'm sure today she's still working.
Can you stay with us a little longer, Steve?
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit more about this with Dr. Shealy. Dr. Shealy, when you were practicing medicine as a young person, didn't you have to take an oath, the Hippocratic Oath?
To graduate, yes.
Mm-hmm. And does that oath mean anything, do you think, to doctors and nurses? Do you think it means anything, or is it just some formality?
Well, I think it depends on the individuals, like everything else. We're all unique human beings, and some of us pay lip service to things, and some of us believe in them.
Well, okay, in this case where the nurse tampered with narcotic medication that was used for pain relief as an opioid, and the nurse replaced that with tap water, would you say that violated the Hippocratic Oath of first do no harm?
That is correct.
Mm-hmm. So there's a violation of oath of practice. Steve Elkins,
it's a violation
what is your
of
take?
common sense and all kinds of things, because, tap water is not given intravenously ever, or intramuscular even. You just don't do that.
And the reason for that is?
It's toxic. It's toxic enough when you take it by mouth, but to inject it into somebody, that could cause serious pain, if nothing else.
Well, it caused these patients were diagnosed as a result of this with sphygmonosis, and I don't know how to pronounce this, Paucimobilis. Steve, do you know how to pronounce that?
These are
Paucimobilis?
In other words, the chlorine did not keep them sterile. But let God, did you just take it out into a sterile syringe and just use? We're talking about the ultimate. To me, this is as criminal as shooting someone.
Right.
Well, we're talking about someone who's suffering with cancer, their immune system is down, and then injecting them with a toxic substance that just happens to be clear.
Vincent, how'd you spell that again? Because I didn't get the spelling.
Sphygmonas, Sphingomonas. Next word, Paucimobilis. Bacillimobilis.
You know, I got to admit, I don't know these two. I'm sorry, can't help you on that one. But Dr. Shealy's correct. Water or tap water for ingestion is not sterile. It's not. It's got lots of additives. Who knows what's in there? A lot of times, and we know there's lots of fluoride in there, and there's a lot of stuff that's not taken out at the the purification plants or the water treatment plants. And so you put this into a muscular cavity, or into any surface where it's not intended to go, and you're going to have some complications. It's sad. I guess
Steve Elkins.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, you've been trained as a nurse. You've got a degree, and you are a licensed nurse. Now, is it possible in your training that you would have ever missed knowing that you do not inject tap water intravenously or intramuscularly?
I'm thinking that this nurse wasn't too smart. She should have known that. I would assume they teach that in school. Maybe they don't teach it. I don't know. It's been a while since I've been out of school, but maybe she missed that in training and never thought about it. And maybe just her opioid addiction itself superseded any common sense or any of her education, because people who are drug addicts dependent, they don't quite think the same way as you and I do. They don't rationalize things the way we do. Their analytical, critical thought is gone, and their immediate fix, getting immediate fix, is probably their first priority. That's it.
Dr. Shealy, is it possible that in your training that it was not taught that injecting tap water is absolutely something you don't do because it's toxic?
I can almost guarantee you that I was not told that. That goes beyond training. It's common sense.
Yeah, that's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, we talked about
you never.
That was never a possibility.
You never. I have never seen a bag of, when someone's dehydrated. I've never seen a bag of tap water. Never. No. I've never seen anyone rinse out a syringe with tap water. I've never seen that.
You shouldn't.
Yeah, right. Okay, so Dr. Shealy, then Steve, when we are in the presence of someone who's going to jab us with a hypodermic needle, what do we need to make sure that we know? What questions do we need to ask? Before you stick me with that, I got a couple questions. What are those questions that you would recommend, Dr. Shealy, then Steve?
Is it guaranteed sterile?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you going to wipe my skin with something to sterilize it before you stick it in?
Well, we have some certain rules we follow when we come into a patient's room. A lot of times we'll look at the patient, we'll look at the ID band, make sure we have the right patient, the right medication. I usually have a MAR in front of me, a medical administration record in front of me. I look at it, last time the medication's been given, make sure it's the right patient, the right medication, the right route, and the right time. And make sure that there's no history. I mean, I know what the allergies are, so not to have any problems with that. So, there's certain things we got to follow, and if you follow them to a T, there's no problems. It's when people say, I'm going on my recollection and my memory, and they simply walk into the wrong room. They think they're in another patient's room because they're going back. They have so many different patients, and they make the mistake of not following the criteria we follow to make sure you have the right patient, the right medication, the right route.
All right.
So
well, let me ask you this.
I would ask that person giving me the medication, what medication are you giving me? And there's nothing wrong with actually a patient having his MAR in front of him also to say, well, I want to see my medications, and so you know that the correct medication is coming to you. They make mistakes because they walk into the wrong room. I've seen doctors do that. walk in the wrong room thinking this is the other patient, and they start writing me a script telling me to send this down to pharmacy. And I said, no, you got the wrong patient. This patient's allergic to that. And they go, what? Yeah, you must be thinking about next door. And because he's got some bacteria growing. So I can't, it's my responsibility to catch the mistakes of a physician, which I'm all right to do. I have no problem with that. They're under a lot of stress. They have a lot more patients than me. And so my job is to make sure I catch a mistake and so we don't carry it out.
Okay. As a nurse, Steve Elkins, do you look at the prescribed dosage? Let's say it's 10 cc's, and you look at that and you say, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. That's 10 times what it should be. I think it should be 1 cc. Do you ever see things like that? And then before you give the injection of what you think would be 10 times the amount, since the previous dosage might have been 1 cc, do you stop and say, wait a minute, I'm gonna double, triple, quadruple check this with the doctor?
Most of the time,
before giving it? Do you ever do that?
I never get prescribed medications like that. Nothing's filled with a syringe. Say, here's a syringe, because pharmacy would have to do that, and it's not done. What I will do is get a vial sent to me, and I'll check it with the medication administration record to make sure what the medication is and if they can accept it. And I have a little theory, little thing that I follow. It's called you can give more, but you can't take away. So when it comes down to cardiac medications, medications for sedation or pain, I go lower because I can always give more, and I like to trial it to see how the patient responds to it. Because if I give the amount that's actually ordered sometimes, right off the bat, I'll find out, well, my patient's not accepting it, he's having adverse reaction, or he's symptomatic with his blood pressure is dropping now. So I like I can give more, but I can't take away theory. And it works for me every time. I've never had a failure on that. I'll give a little dose, see how it responds, does good. You get the second part of the dose. Other than that, if you give too much, you can't take away. The last thing you want to do is start, taking an ambu bag and bagging your patient because now he's not breathing very well or strong enough to oxygenate his body. So that's my theory, and it works for me every time.
Dr. Shealy, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it always should be checked and cross-checked with the patient's chart. It's just that simple.
And what about common sense, Dr. Shealy? Since you are writing the book, Who Killed Common Sense? What about common sense if you are following another doctor and you look at the medications and you think, wait a minute, I don't think this is right.
Well, if I saw that,
what would be your next?
I would discuss it with a physician.
Right.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So what we're now saying is someone who is in the medical profession who is conscientious should not only just look at the orders, but actually determine whether they are realistic, make sense, and should be given. And that would be like following orders blindly versus making sure that you're executing the orders with forethought. And I applaud both of you gentlemen for doing that. But I have seen firsthand a nurse with a family member give 10 times the dose. I've seen that. And it was heart medicine. And it drove the patient into, let's say blood pressure of 40/80.
Yep.
I've seen
that
it.
common sense.
Have you seen it?
With her teaching, she should have known better. You had somebody who wasn't thinking, because I've received orders that I said, that's a huge dose, and a physician will say that they can handle that. That's where I go with that, giving half, challenging the patient, and then if they do fine with it, well then, I'll give the second half. But like I said, if you give the full dose and you have this, go with that on the side of cautiousness to say, you know what, I don't want to subject my patient who's having a problem with a crisis in blood pressure here. So, let's, on the cardiac medication, let's give half. Let's watch for a little while. Let's give it 20, 30 minutes. We'll see what happens. And if the blood pressure starts to come down a little bit here and everything seems to be very stable, and it's still acceptable enough to give another dose, then I will do that. If it's questionable, I will then let the physician know that I've only given half the dose, and here's my blood pressure now. I think that the other part of the dose, giving it might be a bad idea. What is your thought on that? And then they'll make the call themselves to say they'll be fine, go ahead and give them their dose. So on side of caution, I always go that way.
Dr. Shealy and Steve Elkins, I was reading an article about a shortage of versatile medicine used to treat immune disorders and other diseases, and hospitals are now suspending the treatment for many persons because of the shortage of immune globulin type injectables. We talk about that when we come back. We now have a shortage of that, and are you seeing that, gentlemen? We'll be right back with Dr. Norm Shealy and Steve Elkins. Dr. Norm Shealy is with us, normshealy.com, NORMSHEALY.com. Telephone number if you'd like to contact his office in Springfield, Missouri, is 417-351-5221. Also with us, Steve Elkins, a broadcaster on Republic Broadcasting Network, and you can listen to him on Sundays on republicbroadcasting.org. Dr. Shealy, I have 3 quick short answer questions before we get into the drug shortage with you and Steve. Do cell phones cause cancer? Is there a yes or a no answer for that?
I'm sorry?
Is there a yes or no answer for do cell phones or can cell phones cause cancer? Is there a yes or no answer?
Yes. I think unequivocally they could cause cancer, especially of the brain.
Okay. How about smart meters? Can they cause cancer?
I think the evidence suggests that they can. The proof there is not quite as clear as it is with cell phones.
Okay. How about nitrates and nitrites in hot dogs?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And so the answer is they can. Very good. So now the topic is immune globulin medications. And right now, we know they're harvested from plasma, a component of blood, but people with compromised immune systems need those types of medications to fight off infections. But right now, there's a shortage of those medications. And so it looks like we're doing triage, and we're saying, well, if you're going to die, we've got some for you. But if it looks like you're not going to die, well, we're not going to be able to help you because we're saving those meds for people who are really, really seriously ill and could die. Have you found that is that the supply of IG-type meds are in a short supply in your practice, Dr. Shealy?
Well, I haven't, but then, unfortunately, that's not something that I come across. I'm not requested that for my patients, so I don't really know.
Okay. All right. How about you, Steve Elkins? Have you heard of this?
Well, those kind of medications are usually used in an oncology unit, and I don't see those patients at all, so I can't comment on shortages on that. I have seen shortages in my 26 years, Versed, many other medications, and it's unheard of. It's kind of puzzling to say, well, why do we have shortages? We can never really find an answer out why a pharmaceutical would say we're only making a limited amount, and once it's gone, it's kind of gone, or we're in short supply, and then we have rations on the medication that's definitely necessary for patient care. No explanation. Can't seem to find anybody who gives us an answer for that. Why is the medication in short supply, and we need it? I don't know.
Okay, how about this one? How about meds coming from China? It looks like China is quietly becoming the world's pharmacy. Are you seeing that in your world, Dr. Shealy? I'm talking about antibiotics and.
I don't get into those things very often. I only order from American manufacturers. There is no circumstance in which I would willingly order anything made in China.
Okay. So, well, class, it looks like pharmaceutical drugs are coming from China and India at a greater and greater quantity. Steve Elkins, are you seeing that as well?
I can't tell you where the fentanyl is coming from. I have to look at the vial next time, but I know China has a huge market of illegal fentanyl, and I assume that if they have an illegal supply, I'm sure they may have legal supply also. And I don't know where the pharmaceuticals are getting their fentanyl from. I can't comment on that right offhand, but I do know there's a lot of fentanyl coming in from China on the streets. Actually, I met a guy the other day who he said he was up in Pennsylvania when I was up with my mother, and he said he was there for a funeral. So what happened? He said his cousin overdosed. I said, "You're kidding, man? What?" He said, "Heroin and fentanyl." So it's out there. It's on the street. Evidently, if there's enough of it out, the street price must be very, very low, and there's an epidemic problem right there. But I don't see anybody really pointing a finger at the illegal stuff coming in from Mexico and China. It's simply pointing a finger at our pharmaceuticals here as they created the problem. Not sure how that's all working out. They're not going after China after so much.
Well, I wouldn't buy
about 11 years
from
ago.
China. I wouldn't buy any food or any kind
you.
of health thing from China. Period.
Including dog food, because there was menu foods out of Canada made lots of labels of dog food, and it was combined. The dog food was combined with melamine from China, which is a waste product. I guess they used it as a filler, and it killed one of our dogs. And we weren't the only ones. There were many dogs. But 246 people died about 11 years ago in the aftermath of a blood thinner, heparin, which had been manufactured in China. 246 people died. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Dr. Norm Shealy, medical doctor.
Appreciate it.
Steve Elkins, nurse. Thank you.